Welcome to the Cosmic Buster. My name is Bobby Cody. An introduction to the secret hidden history of Tartary. Tartarian Empire, video number 2. That's the name of this video. I've already done, you may ask if this is an introduction video, why is this video number 2? We're going to talk about that in a moment. But first I just want to tell where I got a lot of this information, what I'm basing this current video around that I'm going to expound upon. It's a website, it's called Stolen History. It used to be stolenhistory.org. I came across this supposed hidden empire in history called Tartary, or the Tartarian Empire. And it was very intriguing to me because I have an extensive knowledge of history and maps, and I can talk about the borders of pretty much any country. I meet people from all over the place. Oh, you're there. Oh, yeah, you're there. You like border this country, right? And they're like, wow, how do you know all this stuff? I study maps and know history, and so I have a good basis of knowledge upon which to analyze this, and that's what we're going to do right now. And there's going to be several videos upon this that I'm going to expound upon. And part of what reason why this fit in so well is because at this point in my life, I have a very good knowledge of the general broad base of human history, starting from 10 to 12,000 years ago right till now. What we know of 10 to 12,000 years ago, it's not much. Our real knowledge comes from about 6,000 years ago, and it gets clearer as we go on. But I have this good knowledge of the broad swath of human history, at least as mainstream historians teach it and acknowledge it. So, I've studied maps as well, and I've seen these maps, old maps that say Tartary. And I've come across this hypothesis that there's this secret hidden empire called Tartary, and I started doing research on it, and I found this great website. Stolenhistory.org it was. So I've been studying it, studying around it, this has been Asia. Tartary is in Asia. Matter of fact, I'm going to put up a map right here, right now. Grand Tartary. Grand Tartary, this is a map of Grand Tartary, and this alleges this is where secret history proponents of this Tartarian Empire point to this. They said, look at this Grand Tartary. Look at this huge empire that existed that is not spoken about ever. So this website, secrethistory.org, I started to really study up on it because this Asia is one of my blind spots when I in human history. And this, for me, this would allow me to really expound upon my knowledge of history and see if this is true, the secret history and hidden empire. And the more I've studied about this, the more I've learned that I believe it is true. And I'm going to show some information and talk about history, and it'll be a way to really expound upon this. It's just some fascinating stuff. It really is. A lot of it's going to blow your mind. So this website, secrethistory.org, I'm studying upon it, and then all of a sudden it's gone. I go to Secret History, it's gone. I'm clicking on it, and I had been preparing this video for about 2 months. I'm like, wow, I can't believe this. So for a good 2 or 3 weeks, I'm thinking it's gone. I keep on going back. It's not up. Finally, I went to the Wayback Machine, tried to find it, but the website that I wanted to do this, the particular web page on this website that I wanted to do this video based around was gone. I couldn't find it. So finally, after several weeks, somebody mirrored the old website. They got all the information, they mirrored up. Now it's, instead of stolenhistory.org, it's stolenhistory.net, if I remember correctly. I'm going to provide the link below so you can see, read, and look at this website yourself. But I'm going to expound upon this website. I'm going to correct some of this website too. But it's a great start to what the Tartarian Empire is and proof that it is hidden. Like I said, I've found a lot more information that has further confirmed this hypothesis. But this is going to be the jumping off point that we're going to start upon. So let me first, I threw up the Grand Tartary map here. Let me show first why this is video number 2 and not 1. I'm going to throw up right here, right now, genealogy. It's a genealogy. I don't know what language that is. It's probably French. But it says genealogy translates as a genealogy of the ancient emperors of Tartary, Tartarian Empire. Emperors of Tartary. It's an empire. Great. So you take a look, and if you look at the bottom of it, everything, all the videos, all the pictures and everything that I show you here today, I'm going to zip all of this up. Every single graphic that is in this, I'm going to zip it all up. I'm going to throw it in my Google Drive. I'm going to provide a link to it down below as well. So every one of these things that I'm going to show up here throughout this video, you're going to have the ability to download and take a look at all this information yourself, blow it up, see what it looks like, and see all the different, because a lot of writing in different languages, old languages, scripts, so it's hard to see. You'll be able to blow it up. I want people to be able to confirm everything that I've been doing and all that I've been researching. But to me, this is genuine. I mean, it's very extensive. And this is essentially a family tree of the Tartarian emperor. And at the bottom of it, you see Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan was the founding emperor of the Tartarian Empire. And now, who is Genghis Khan? Genghis Khan is also the founder of the Mongol Empire. So essentially, under this hypothesis, the Mongol Empire eventually became the Tartarian Empire. According to traditional historians, the Mongol Empire lasted, if I remember correctly off the top of my head, about 100 years, a little longer. Maybe from like 1197 to like 1295, something like that. I think about 100 years. And that's just a general ballpark estimate off the top of my head. In later videos, we're going to go into depth, and I'll correct myself if I'm wrong. But regardless of that, it appears that it either revivified or continued, and that's what we're going to explore. But so here's the genealogy. You have all of these different emperors, and that's why video number 1 wasn't the introduction to the Tartarian Empire. Video number 1, which I'm going to provide a link to up here if you want to go see that one first, was about Genghis Khan. And the video, if I remember correctly, my video is called What Did Genghis Khan Look Like and Why Is It Important? And what I found was that our typical view of Genghis Khan is wrong. What he looked like is wrong. I go over that. And right there in video 1, what we show is, whether it's hidden intentionally or accidentally, we have a misconception about Genghis Khan. And that's what that video is about. And it's about what he looked like and his facial characteristics and his racial characteristics too. So I encourage you to go look at it. So here we had this big family tree of Genghis Khan that covers his empire. His empire was ultimately, allegedly split up among his sons, 4 sons. I'm not going to go into the details on that right now. But we see this family tree and how it expands out. We talked about also in that video how Genghis Khan, like 2%, like a large swath of humanity, millions and millions and millions of people are descended from Genghis Khan. This particular family tree, as big as you see it is, as extensive as this is just his one wife. His preeminent wife, his first wife who he was with most of his life. He had 5 other wives. I think he had 6 wives, and according to the last thing I read, he had 500 concubines. I'm not sure how accurate that is. So with 6 wives and 500 concubines, you can imagine after about 2 or 3 generations, he probably had hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of descendants. I continued doing research, and it's beyond that. I mean, you wouldn't believe. There's later his descendants were rulers in other places too, and they had 5,000 concubines, and they got them pregnant. I mean, There's a reason why this guy Genghis Khan is descended from, 2% of the population is descended from him. Not only him, but his descendants were profligate breeders, like you wouldn't believe. So, but essentially what I'm doing here with this family tree is I'm tying in Genghis Khan as the founding emperor of this Tartarian empire. Okay, so let's move on now to this next. I threw this up before, but I just want to throw this up again. So I want to talk about what it says under there. This is the map of Grand Tartary. Secrethistory.net goes through. And it doesn't say that it's just a tract of land. It says it's a country. Down below here, it lists the 1771, the year 1771, Encyclopedia Britannica. Those is for you young guys. This is the Wikipedia of hundreds of years ago. The encyclopedia that's where Wikipedia comes from. Encyclopedia. All knowledge was bound up in these books, encyclopedias, and they were listed alphabetically, and you can have this huge, all these dozens and dozens of books listed alphabetically called encyclopedia, and they had knowledge on every single subject you could imagine listed alphabetically. Encyclopedia was like the internet. It's like the old internet, essentially, in a lot of ways. Yes, I had encyclopedias. They're fascinating. I used to read entire encyclopedias. Love them. But this 1771 Encyclopedia Britannica lists Tartary. And this is Tartary, a vast country in the northern parts of Asia, bounded by Siberia on the north and west. This is called Grand Tartary. Now, note that it says it's a country. We're going to come back to that in a moment. I'm going to read the rest. Tartars who lie north of Muscovy, or Moscow, and Siberia are those of Astrakhan and Dagestan, situated northwest of the Caspian. And there's Tartars who lie between Siberia and the Caspian. The Uzbek. Uzbekistan is now named after those Uzbek tribes. Tartars and Mongols, Moguls, all of them are essentially Tartars. Who lie north of Persia and India, and lastly, south of those, Tibet, who lie north of China. Now, this Mongolia, I'm not going to throw up a map on it, but just heads up. Mongolia, matter of fact, we have it here. We still have the map here. I'm going to talk about this map, sorry. You see Grand Tartary. Essentially, if you look where the square is, the square is hiding China. So right above that, that square where we had its encyclopedia, that's Mongolia, okay? Below that is China. Mongolia is just a little sliver of Grand Tartary. Mongolia is where the Genghis Khan originated, and from which he went out and burst out and started this great Mongol empire, which, according to this, is now Grand Tartary. You can see Persia to the left there. You can see, I'm not going to say left. You can see Persia to the west, southwest actually of Grand Tartary. You can see India, and then we have China. That's important to remember that. We're going to talk about that later. So that's what we have here. We have Grand Tartary. So they said 1700. It's a country, okay? What do we say about it now? I'm not going to go to screenshots about this, but if you look up Wikipedia, the screenshot on Stolen History, the current Wikipedia, when Stolen History went up, said that Tartary or Grand Tartary is just a vast tract of land. It doesn't say that it's a country. 1700s is saying it's a country. Now they're saying, oh, it's just a vast tract of land. No country at all. I went to Wikipedia nowadays. I'm not going to throw up a screenshot of it. You can check yourself. But it basically says the same thing. It says, it's just this land over there the Europeans called Tartary. That's all. Don't worry about it. We're going to go into why that doesn't appear to be the case, that what we are currently taught about Tartar is wrong, and that in 1700 they were right, it is a country. So we're going to take a look at that right now. Take a look at this, just a quick screenshot, and I think this is the same. Yeah, that's the same one that was in the corner of the map, so I'm not going to throw that up to you. What I do want to show you right now, what is one of the things that make up a country? Government, obviously, and one of the standard operating symbols of a government, and it's just a symbol, not operating symbol, but a symbol, is the flag. All countries have flags throughout history, to my knowledge. I don't think there are many examples where there weren't any. So here I'm going to throw this up. What do we have? This is what stolen history goes to show that there was a Tartar, there was an empire. It has a flag. Boom. And they put it right next to the Chinese flag. And the reason he puts that next to the Chinese flag is some people say, Chinese Tartary. Yeah, when we're talking about Tartar, we're just talking about Chinese Tartary. No. He's saying there was a China and there was a Tartary, and he points to the flags side by side here in old flag atlases. So, and note that they are similar. They're very similar. I think that's a griffin on both of the flags. I'm not sure about that. I have to research. It's griffin. It might be a dragon on the Chinese flag. I think it's either a dragon or a griffin. We'll see. Regardless, though, so it has a flag. Vast tracts of land, as Wikipedia called it, don't have flags. That's evidence that this was a nation. This wasn't just a vast tract of land. So then I just want to take a look at this real quick. We also have a distinction not only between that Tartary had its own flag. We have another example here from stolenhistory.org. You can see it as Stolen History in the corner there. Remember, that's .net now if you want to take a look at it. Stolenhistory.net. The Empire of Tartary had a flag. You see, it's very clearly, it says in what's probably French, Empire of Tartary down below. And above it says Empire of Tartary and presumably English. And then there's a flag for just Tartary. Empire of Tartary flag has a griffin, again, like we were seeing before. This is a different stylization of the same flag. And next to it, we have just the flag for Tartary, which is an owl. So we have a distinction between the flag for Tartary, the nation, and for the Empire of Tartary. Again, this suggests that not only was there Tartary as a nation, but there was an Empire of Tartary too that exceeded the boundaries of that Tartary nation. Wow. Okay? So now we're starting to say, okay, this, to me, I mean, you have all these flags and different flags for it. This is an empire and a nation, no question about it. And again, we have a genealogy of the empires, and it starts with Genghis Khan. This is all becoming more and more convincing. Next, he turns to another flag that is a Tartar flag of sorts, but it points to some historical manipulation that may be a case. I haven't confirmed this historical manipulation, but I want to talk about it because it's very convincing. And the flags are a jumping off point. So the next flag we're going to take a look at here is the flag of the Viceroy of Muscovy. Essentially, the author of Stolen History, what he talks about is that, in the flags, these old flag listings that you see from hundreds of years ago, when they're talking about, they list all the different Russian flags. And they list them in order of essentially the highest one, the most preeminent one. Which one is the first one they list? The Viceroy of Muscovy, or Moscow, which is Moscow. Moscow is presumably well known as the capital of Russia. Okay, so a viceroy? What's a viceroy? A viceroy, the definition of viceroy, essentially off the top of my head, you can confirm if you'd like for me, is a viceroy is a representative of a foreign power or an emperor. An emperor isn't just a king, emperor is a king of kings. Okay? and which is something that goes back all the way to Sargon of Akkad, et cetera, et cetera. Um, he is the king of kings. His empire consists of a whole bunch of kings, but he is the king of kings. He rules all these kings. Okay, so as the emperor, or the king of kings, in a far-flung empire, you need representatives who are watching over the king. The emperor has to watch over all his kings to make sure they're doing what he wants. That's the viceroy. So here we'd have the flag of the Viceroy of Muscovy. The Viceroy. Okay, so Viceroy from who? From Tartary. It's Tartar Muscovy. This was part of the Tartarian Empire. Ah, so you say, okay. So at some point, now we've already put up that map of Grand Tartary. That's Russia. Grand Tartary is Russia. So at some point there was this conversion where the, the Rus is essentially a Viking people. Russian, got the name from the Viking people. These Viking peoples ultimately move into the area of St. Petersburg and around the south of Finland, and essentially they built they built a trade network through the rivers of Europe there. I'm not sure which one. I think it might be the Danube. I can't. Yeah, almost certain it's Danube. I may be wrong about that. Maybe the Volga River. My specific geography on rivers in Europe is a little bit wanting. But essentially, the Rus, these Viking people, created this trade network and et cetera, through, and this is the European part of Russia, the way, way, way western part of Russia. They didn't have any control over what is now considered Russia. They were just in this little sliver, still Europe. No, not deep in Asia. The current Russia is 8 time zones. America's 4 time zones. I think current Russia is, I think it's 8, maybe 7, maybe even be 9. But I know it's like 7, 8, or 9. Russia's wide, huge. But back then, it would have been one little time zone. It's just the far western part. So at some point, Tartary converted into Russia. And that's where we're going to talk about real quick and what Stolen History talks about. It talks about, and this is one of my blind spots historically. So in the future, I'm going to do edifications upon this. But essentially, he talks about Napoleon. Now, Napoleon, those who are unaware, Napoleon, it was around the 1790s, I think early 1800s too. I got to get specific dates down, Pat, and we'll do that in the future one. But around 1790s, 1800, actually into 18, I think, well into 1810s too, I think. Napoleon started a series of wars to conquer much of Europe, and in one of those campaigns he went into Russia. And standard historians say that he was invading Russia. Boom, end of story. What Stolen History talks about is that this isn't quite true, and they provide evidence of that. The leader of Russia during this time of Napoleon was Tsar Alexander, is my understanding, based on reading this. And then Tsar Alexander and Napoleon, supposedly, Napoleon, if he was invading Russia, he was going against Tsar Alexander. However, he points to several examples, including this medal and several medallions of, this is Tsar Alexander on the right there, and Napoleon hugging. And essentially what he's saying is that Napoleon wasn't invading Russia. They were allies. He was allies with the Rus, or the Russians, and what he was doing was invading the Tartarian Empire. And it was successful, and they rid the Tartarians of Moscow, because when Napoleon invaded Russia, or the Rus, he didn't go to their capital, St. Petersburg, where Alexander was. He went to Moscow, which wasn't the current capital of the Rus. He wasn't going after the Rus. He was allied, Napoleon was allied with the Rus going after the Tartars. Because as we showed before, that Viceroy of Muscovy was Tartar, it was Tartar Muscovy. It was part of the Tartarian Empire. So, you know, to me, this is fascinating. I'm going to delve into this further to verify this theory of his. So this is very fascinating, and you can see where in the weeds everything's getting hidden. I've already talked about Genghis Khan and what he looked like. We have a complete misconception of what he looked like. Now we have a potential misconception of history as well. A major part of history where Napoleon wasn't invading the Rus, he was invading the Tartars. Interesting. So now what I want to turn to real quick is further evidence. He just talks, this is some type of entertainment flyer. And it's just evidence that Tartary was a big empire. There was knowledge of Tartary, the Tartarian Empire, and that it was profligate in the artistic and elite circles. This is Madam Anna Bishop, encouraged by the great success attending her previous concerts. This is a flyer for an opera. So that's what I'm reading right now, just to let you know. Grand musical festival at a saloon, Carusi Saloon, on Wednesday evening, upon which occasion she'll appear a grand mythological scene dressed as the goddess of liberty, which is actually the Statue of Liberty, in her beautiful costume and sing l'amoureuse, assisted by a full and efficient and invisible chorus, will also desire, blah, blah, blah. The entertainment will commence and be celebrated by musical, fantastical scenes of circumstance in appropriate costume and sing in 6 different languages: Russian, German, English, French, Tartarian, and Italian. So here we have a flyer where they're going to talk about she's going to sing this opera in 6 different languages, including Tartarian. So we have a Tartarian language too. So this again proves that there was this language that was pretty common. Just, you've all heard of Russian, you've heard of German, you've heard of English, you've heard of French, you've heard of Italian. Have you heard of Tartarian? I hadn't before this. So again, it's something from popular culture that once again shows that something that was common is now appears to have been thrown apart, thrown under the rug. So it's interesting. So here, then we go, okay, we're on Russia and the elimination of Tartarian Empire from history. Is there further evidence of that? And yes, and this is something from Secret History. Again, it takes from a CIA document that was declassified recently, relatively recently in historical terms. And this CIA document is an analysis of the Soviet Union. Soviet Union, which is Russia on steroids, Russia plus other nations that became the Soviet Union. It is a CIA document that takes a look at the Soviet Union, aka Russia, and their oppression of the Tartars, because the Tartars are a people in Russia. It says, let us take the matter of history, which along with religion, language, and literature constitute the core of a people's cultural heritage. Here again, the communists, the Soviets, Russia, where which used to be Grand Tartary, have interfered in a shameless manner. For example, on the 9th of August 1944, the Central Committee of the Communist Party, sitting in Moscow, issued a directive ordering the party's Tartar Provincial Committee to proceed to a scientific revision of the history of Tartaria, to liquidate serious shortcomings and mistakes of a nationalistic character committed by individual writers and historians in dealing with Tartar history. In other words, Soviets were concerned with a nationalistic character of the history committed by individual writers. With a nationalistic character, Tartar is a nation. they wanted to eliminate it, and Tartarians are talking about it. So, in other words, Tartar history was to be rewritten, as he says. Let us be frank, as the CIA document says. Let's be frank, was to be falsified. I'm going to read that again. In other words, Tartar history was to be rewritten. Let us be frank, was to be falsified in order to eliminate reference to great Russian aggression and to hide the facts of the real course of Tartar-Russian relations. And this was no isolated case. In every Muslim area within the USSR, should state the Tartarian Empire, while it was presumably most of the people were Muslim, it was very, very open, and they had no issues with any other religions whatsoever. It was like, hey, be whatever you want. There's no oppression of religions in the Tartarian Empire. And every historians on other have rewritten history to distort the facts so that the Russians appear always in good light. Needless to say, histories which present the facts truthfully have been withdrawn and destroyed, so that the present and future generations of Muslims are forever denied the chance of learning the true facts of their nation's past. So, now this is a 1940s CIA document. At that point, there was still some lingering knowledge of Tartaria, which under this theory ended essentially with Napoleon. Must have, but we'll go into that in future videos. We're going to start to end this up in the next few minutes, but there's some more fascinating stuff that you've really got to see. And this next one is more evidence of the Tartarian Empire. And I've gone into deep, on surrounding empires, and it's going to blow your mind. But essentially, I want to talk about right now of where that Tartarian Empire may have stretched. The Tartarian Empire would have picked up from the alleged destruction of the Mongol Empire. I have to look at all of that information. But essentially, this also coincided with the advent of colonialism. Colonialism started in the late 1400s, early 1500s, where the Spaniards and Portuguese and later the English, etc., started to go to North and South America and colonize those lands. And they found Indians. And there's been some question about who the Indians are, etc. We're going to look at evidence that the Indians are, and what the Europeans found was Tartarian colonization. The Tartarian Empire first colonized North America. And because we're going to throw up a map right now. According to secrethistory.net, if you take a look at the yellow on the right-hand side of this map here, you see where Tartaria would have been. And on the left, you see North America. According to an analysis of this map, the Tartarians, the east part of Tartary connects with Alaska. Okay, Tartary, or Russia, it's now Russia, but what then was Tartary, and Alaska are just a few miles from each other. The peninsulas connect to each other. Under this theory, the Tartarians' empire spread into the western parts of North America, Canada, and the western United States, and even all the way to potentially eastern United States. I'm going to go into details on that too, which I think you'll find fascinating. But here again, I'm going to throw up this one map of North America with a comment on it. This appears to be old. I can't verify the authenticity of its old past. I can't verify that this is something that somebody just created now. I believe this to be real, though, or otherwise I wouldn't be showing it to you. And this is on secrethistory.net again. And it states, it's a map of North America. You can see North America divided with the right half pinkish, left half, or I should say the eastern part pinkish and the western part greenish. And in front of the greenish part is a little box and states, having achieved this conquest, the Tartars and their descendants had probably a much harder task to perform. This was to subdue the more ferocious and warlike European colonists who had entrenched and fortified themselves in the country after the arrival of the Tartars, or Indians, as they are now called, in the particular parts they had settled themselves in along the region of the Atlantic. So under this theory, the Native Americans are Tartars. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that, but I think that is the case. I think there's abundance of evidence in that regard, and I'm going to put all my knowledge of history into an analysis of this in future videos. But yes, I think there's evidence that the Tartars colonized North America all the way up to the eastern United States, but particular in the western. The evidence in the western Canada, United States is overwhelming. Future videos will go about that. Finally, I want to do a correction to stolenhistory.net and stolenhistory.org. They made one mistake, but it's also a great jumping off point for future videos, and I want to take a look at that as well. In stolenhistory.net, he goes over these busts. These busts are in Turkey, and there are various busts of empire rulers. And all these empire rulers are, almost all of them, are associated with Genghis Khan and the subsequent empire, which proceeded from Genghis Khan and his conquests. I want to take a look at them real quick. And I just want to show, this one here in particular is Batu Han. If you take a look at the dates underneath, Batu Han was I think he was son or the grandson of Genghis Khan. If I remember, I'm pretty sure he was a son, may have been a grandson. But I just want to throw that up there. And once again, you can see, look at him. Caucasians are the only ones who have full beards. If you see anybody with a full beard, they're almost certainly Caucasian. There's one other group of peoples, the natives of Japan, who also have beards. But almost exclusive. If you have a full beard, you're Caucasian. You may be part Caucasian, like African Americans, 25% Caucasian on average. Most African Americans, I believe, can grow a full beard. But that's because they're Caucasian. Africans can't grow beards. Neither can East Asians, like the Han Chinese people. Here, Batu Han, boom, big full beard. He's Caucasian and descended from Genghis Khan. Again, we're just pointing to the fact that Genghis Khan was a Caucasian, and not as he's particularly portrayed. But once again, I want to point to the dates underneath there. It says 1227 to 1502 for Batu Han. And Stolen History says, look at the dates. This guy lived, 280 years. What's going on with that? No. All the dates on those busts aren't the dates of the lives of the individuals. It's the dates of the empires that they presided over. Batu Han, if I remember correctly, maybe I think his was the Chagatai. I have to go into the details on this and make sure I iron everything out, which we're going to do in future videos. But I believe it was the Chagatai Empire. When Genghis Khan broke up his empire, broke it up into 4 different parts, gave it to his different sons, and I remember correctly, Batu Han was a Chagatai. Maybe wrong about that, but essentially those dates, I'm pretty certain 1227, 1502 are the Chagatai Empire's dates, how long that lasted. And we're going to go into that, and I suspect that the real Tartarian Empire was subsequent to that, like after 1500. We'll piece it all together later. But there's other busts I want to take a look at. There's one guy named Etrogol Ghazi. I don't know much about that. No dates on him, so I'm not concerned with that one. Bumin Kagan. He had another empire. We may take a look at. Tamerlane. His empire was particularly interesting, Tamerlane, because he claimed to be that descended from Genghis Khan. Well, he didn't, to my knowledge. He had no royal blood. All the Khans were royal blood, and they were the royalty everywhere, all over Asia. The Khans, and again, we'll talk about that later. Although Tamerlane claimed to be descended from Genghis Khan, I do know, I'm pretty certain that this guy ultimately with his empire. Some people think that he claimed to be Genghis Khan in order to give him legitimacy in his empire. There's no question that one of the things that he did in order to gain legitimacy in his empire is he married a princess who was descended from Genghis Khan. And once again, what that shows is this Genghis Khan's descendants were royalty all through this entire Tartarian nation or tract of land. We'll call it a tract of land for that part. So there we have Tamerlane. Attila the Hun is another one that's up there. I won't talk about that too much. I'll throw it up there real quick. This is one I really wanted to talk about. This will be the final one we look at before we sign off. This is Babur Shah. He is another descendant of Genghis Khan, and he ruled the Mughal Empire, and that Mughal Empire existed from 1526 to 1858 in what is the northern part of India. And it's pretty fascinating. Number one, because he was, again, a descendant of Genghis Khan. And number two, because that Mughal Empire existed during the same time that the Tartarian Empire is said to have existed, and yet it's not considered a part of the Tartarian Empire, and yet still it was ruled by a descendant of Genghis Khan. So that Tartarian Empire, even in portions where it didn't proliferate, like into northern India, there was still a Genghis Khan descendant ruling it, which can show you that this Tartarian Empire could potentially exert its influence very far-flung through its relations. There's going to be other videos. I'm going to look into possible integration of the Khan royalty with European royalty. I suspect that's the case as well. We're going to look at, in particular, various aspects of red hair and the proliferation of red hair and what we can find in that regard, because we determined that Genghis Khan had red hair as well. And I think we're going to find some very fascinating stuff in that regard. I know we're going to, because I'm starting to piece it together right now. But I think that's it. It's been a very long video. I'm not used to that. This is going to be my longest video, a single video. We're done. Every single graphic I've shown, we're going to tie up, including that CIA document. I gave a screenshot for that CIA document. The entirety of that CIA document is going to be in the zip file down below as well. And in particular, I do that because our nation is under attack by communism. It's communism. It really is. But it's cloaked as racial justice warriors, sadly. But basically, it's communist in nature. And this CIA document from the 1940s explains what communism does. In the document, it talks about how the communists, when they first came in, they said, Tartars, don't worry, guys. You know, we're communists and we're going to take care of you. You guys are going to be fine. And, you know, you guys are the minority and we're pro-minority. And then communists come on and they just wipe them out and make sure that they're forgotten. That's Black Lives Matter. That's what's happening right now. If they win, you know, they'll end up like the Tartars as well, my opinion, and America potentially as well. thanks for watching. There's going to be many more videos in this regard. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Thanks for watching.